Thanks for joining us on this historic day. We begin the night with breaking news. President Joe Biden announcing he is bowing out of the 2024 presidential race and endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. This comes after mounting calls from Democrats and donors to end his re-election bid. The unprecedented announcement, delivered less than 4 months before Election Day, immediately upended a campaign that both political parties view as the most consequential in generations. It's thrown the 2024 race into disarray. Biden reportedly didn't tell most of his staff of this decision until a minute before making the announcement on social media. This leaves less than a month for Democrats to decide who should replace Biden on the ticket, and just under 4 months for that person to mount a campaign against Trump. Biden is intent to finish his term out and says he will address the nation later on this week. Biden is the first sitting president who is eligible for re-election to decline to run again since Lyndon Johnson in the 1968 election. It remains unclear whether Kamala Harris will become the Democratic nominee despite the president's endorsement. He says making her vice president was the best decision he's made. Harris is seen as the party's natural successor. The 59-year-old is the only candidate who can tap into the Biden campaign war chest based on federal campaign finance rules. Several dozen current and former DNC members have already reportedly signed a letter backing Harris. But even with this endorsement, she could still face a challenge from other Democrats. Sources close to Senator Joe Manchin say he may be considering a run for president. Vice President Harris says she will earn and win the Democratic nomination. She thanked President Biden for his endorsement and decades of service. She says she will do everything in her power to unite the Democratic Party to defeat Donald Trump. With the president's endorsement, Kamala Harris finds herself with another potential opportunity to break some even more barriers. Harris is already the first woman, Black person, or person of South Asian descent to serve as vice president. If she wins the nomination in November, she'd be the first woman to serve as president. An AP poll conducted last week found 6 in 10 Democrats thought Harris would do a good job in the top spot, compared to a 2 in 10 against the move and another 2 in 10 who didn't know enough to decide. Regardless, Democrats will ultimately need to coalesce around one candidate. The party had planned to hold an early vote to officially nominate President Biden. Now there's question of whether that virtual vote will still take place or if they'll wait until the August convention. Delegates could reach a majority during the early vote deciding the new nominee. If they don't reach a majority, it would pave the way for an open conversation. Reactions now coming in from Oregon representatives. In a statement, Oregon Senator Ron Wyden saying he is proud to have worked alongside President Biden and endorses Vice President Kamala Harris, adding, "History will judge the landmark achievements. I am all in to support Vice President Harris with all of my energy to go forward, building on that impressive record and defeating Donald Trump, a convicted felon who wants to yank America backwards with his checkered and erratic past of white right-wing extremism on women's health care and dirty energy and more." Meanwhile, Representative Val Hoyle endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris as well and praising Biden's character and successful administration. Hoyle saying in part, with President Biden's decision not to run for re-election, "I am proud to endorse Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for president so she can build upon this administration's incredibly successful record." Meanwhile, Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley also releasing a statement saying, "No president in my lifetime has done more than Joe Biden. Throughout his decades of public service, President Biden has led with humility and compassion, with a laser focus on making life better for ordinary Americans." He did not, however, immediately endorse Vice President Harris. The Clintons also throwing their support behind Vice President Kamala Harris. Former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton put out a joint statement saying that they are honored to join Biden in endorsing Harris and will do whatever they can to support her. They say it's time to fight with everything we've got to elect her because America's future depends on it. Meanwhile, former President Barack Obama issued a glowing statement reflecting on Biden's legacy. The more than 500-word essay looked back at Biden's decades of public service, including the 8 years spent by Obama's side as vice president. He says, quote, "I also know Joe has never backed down from a fight. For him to look at the political landscape and decide that he should pass the torch to a new nominee is surely one of the toughest in his life. But I know he wouldn't make this decision unless he believed it was right for America. Obama did not endorse Vice President Kamala Harris. Instead, he says he has extraordinary confidence in the party leaders regarding the process over the next month for an outstanding nominee to emerge. President Joe Biden made this decision to drop out of the race today while still isolating at his home in Delaware. It marks the fourth straight day of self-isolation after receiving a COVID-19 diagnosis. According to a letter from his physician this morning, the president has taken an 8th dose of Paxlovid, and his COVID symptoms have, quote, improved significantly. The letter also states that Biden is still performing all of his presidential duties. Well, it's been quite a month for U.S. politics. Let's take a look back at this timeline. On June 27th, candidates met on stage to debate. The 81-year-old often trailed off and gave nonsensical answers. Biden's performance led to the first Democratic lawmaker publicly calling on him to step down on July 2nd. More lawmakers joined the chorus, and the president held his first solo press conference in months on July 11th, addressing the mounting concerns, but vowing to stay in the race. That came during the NATO Alliance's annual summit. Now, this followed by the Supreme Court's immunity decision and dismissal of Trump's classified documents case. Former President Donald Trump then survived an assassination attempt at a rally in Pennsylvania, Biden condemning the violence and calling for unity. California Congressman Adam Schiff becomes the highest profile lawmaker to call on Biden to drop out of the race on July 17th. Many Democrats voiced concerns that Biden's candidacy would impact races up and down the ticket. That same day, President Biden tested positive for COVID-19, ratcheting up concerns about his age and his health. He traveled to Delaware to self-isolate. Meanwhile, Republicans held the national convention in Milwaukee, uniting the party behind Donald Trump and VP pick J.D. Vance. And that brings us to right here today, with President Joe Biden issuing a statement bowing out of the race and throwing his support behind Vice President Kamala Harris. Former President Donald Trump posted his immediate reaction on Truth Social, saying that President Biden was not fit to run for president. The former president went on to say Biden's doctor and the media knew he wasn't capable of serving as president for 4 more years. Trump then posted that he will fix the damage done by the Biden administration and make America great again. Congressional Republicans are now calling on Biden to resign as president in light of his decision to end his re-election campaign. In a statement on social media, House Speaker Mike Johnson says, quote, "If Biden is not fit to run for president, he's not fit to serve as president," adding that Biden should leave office immediately. Prior to the president's announcement, Johnson pushed back against talks to replace Biden, suggesting that any attempt to change the Democratic candidate will be met with legal challenges.
14 million Democrats voted to make Joe Biden the nominee. So it would be wrong and I think unlawful in accordance to some of these states' rules for a handful of people to go in a back room and switch it out because they don't like the candidate any longer.
Donald Trump has been preparing for a possible Biden-Harris rematch. Last week, the former president's campaign declined a vice presidential debate with Kamala Harris, saying they believed she will end up as the Democratic nominee anyways.